Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is another episode of Pinch Hit Friday. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about what happens when you have prolonged periods of insufficient range of motion. So I think first, before we touch on this, we should really dig in on why someone might feel tight. So let's say, for instance, I have an elbow that feels tight. It could be true muscular shortness, right? I could have lost length through the tissues. In this case, if I'm limited in elbow extension, it would be the elbow flexors that may have lost extensibility. So we don't see that really that common unless somebody's been in a really long-term period of immobilization. So you see somebody after a surgery during immobilization. They've actually done studies on rabbit and rat hind limbs where they lose the functional unit of muscle in the sarcomere. These are things that don't happen nearly as common. A lot more often, people are dealing with some kind of what we would call stiffness and not shortness. So that stiffness could be something like a protective tension, meaning my body's laying down trigger points and stability artificially to make up for where it lacks good stiffness, good motor control at a joint. It could be neural tension, right? If I have someone who blew out a disc in their spine, they can have neural tension that feels like tightness in their legs. We could have a previous injury, where there are soft tissue restrictions that develop, meaning those layers of the fascia just don't glide well over each other. And there's entire schools of thought that are based on trying to clean up some of those densifications in the tissue. We may see protective spasming that causes tightness, meaning someone, again, threw out their back and the tissue locks down so that it prevents them from getting to potentially harmful ranges of motion. We certainly can have osseous restrictions, so bony blocks. People may have laid down osteophytes, and eventually they may break off and become loose bodies in the joint. This is something we'll touch on in a second here. And then last but not least, just inadequate stiffness at adjacent joint. This fits hand in hand with the protective tension discussion, where if you imagine an elite sprinter who's got a very anteriorly tilted pelvis and super tight hamstrings, well, your hamstrings are posterior tilters of the pelvis. So they actually are really heavily lengthened when you're in that position of anterior tilt. In this case, if they're really tight, it's because they're firing on all cylinders just to basically try to hold you in some semblance of posterior pelvic tilt. So that's that protective tension that we're talking about. But what we very rarely talk about is what happens when some of these feelings of tightness or long-term periods of stiffness are left unchecked. And really what you have, muscular, capsular alignment issues that may persist for an extended period of time, you can actually develop changes to the joint. So as I mentioned, that could be a bony overgrowth. And there was actually a 2013 study from Dr. Mark Philippon out in Colorado, who's done some really remarkable stuff in the hip community. And he looked at femoral acetabular impingement, meaning bony overgrowth at the hip, of whether it's the acetabulum, so the socket, or the femoral head, and saw how it changed over the various stages of youth hockey. So in the Pee Wee, 10 to 12-year-old level, 37% of them had femoral acetabular impingement, and 48% had associated labral tears. And then when you went up to the bantam level, ages 13 to 15, the numbers went to 63% with FAI and 63% with labral tears. Then when you went to the 16 to 19 age levels, 93% had the bony overgrowth and 93% had the labral tears. So effectively, the longer one plays hockey, the messier the hip is, so the greater the likelihood that femoral acetabular impingement grows and chews up a labrum. So really what we're talking about is, hockey is a sport that puts people into unfavorable positions that create long-term adaptations. And it's not entirely different than, what we see with people who spend a lot of time in the wrong positions, losing motion over the course of time. What the really big message for today is that it's imperative for strength and conditioning coaches to understand these issues. On evaluation, if an athlete already has changes to the joint, we need to create training programs to deliver a training effect while working around these issues. If you squat an entire team of football players, even though 4 to 5 of them already have significant FAI and associated pathologies in their hips, you're probably going to have some that are going to wind up on a hip surgeon's treatment table at some point. In these populations, if you have a high suspicion that you're going to be plowing through some of these bony blocks, you may be better off working on deadlifts, working on single leg work instead. And at the very least, you're going to, create a training effect for them and kick the can down the road for those athletes with respect to chewing up a hip. So you can get performance benefits without the negative health outcomes. On the other hand, if you have an athlete that on assessment, is just a little bit out of alignment, and maybe they have some tissue density and core control issues that may be preventing them from getting, high quality hip flexion and internal rotation that would make squatting safely, you need to design a program to get to work on those problems before they can develop to bony blocks at the hip. So it's really just about having a good assessment process to understand, hey, is this something that's already there that I need to work around? Or is this something that hasn't developed, but good training is going to keep it at bay and we're not going to lay down more bony blocks down the road? So at the end of the day, you want to assess and not just, assume, because that's when things tend to go wrong. And this is why a lot of programs just don't do well when they're written, one size fits all on the dry erase board for an entire group of athletes. So big takeaways: assess, understand why people may lose motion, and then understand whether they've lost it just transiently because of stiffness, muscular shortness, or just poor alignment, or if they've lost it because they've actually changed the joints in question. This episode is brought to you by AG1, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it can be difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can often wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where AG1 can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. That's why I use it daily, as do several of my family members, and we recommend it to a lot of our top athletes. One scoop of AG1 contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients that work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet to support energy, focus, digestion, and recovery. And this can all happen for less than $3 per day and without taking multiple products. While most nutritional supplements come to market and stay stagnant, AG1 continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing over 50 improvements in the last decade alone. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best tasting nutrition happen on the planet. Whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it'll work for you, and it contains less than 1 gram of sugar per serving. They put 75 ingredients through the rigorous NSF certification test to come up with a safe formula that's trusted by some of the world's top athletes, including many of our own at Cressey Sports Performance. Right now, AG1 is giving our listeners a special offer of 10 free travel packets with their first purchase. Just head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim this special offer. These travel packets are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health while you're traveling for games, training, or simply on the go. They can be great counterbalance to the less than ideal on-the-road food options that are out there for a lot of our traveling baseball players. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance of getting nutrient diversity, head to drinkag1.com/Cressey to get 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, Cressey. You won't regret it.